Okay, good. Good evening, everybody. This is College of Complexes. This is our 480th meeting since we started in February 2009. We put on a different speaker every week, and we ask the speaker to be for or against something. And I think everybody's heard the spiel before, so I'm going to dispense with most of that. Does anybody have any announcements they want to make? Anything? Okay, well, I'll announce that Philosophers Forum is meeting on November 12th at Avoca's Restaurant in Richardson, and Paul Benson will be the speaker, and he's going to be talking about crazy crusades, American movements, and manias. So that should be pretty interesting.
Oh, I love him.
That should be a pretty good talk. And Paul Benson does pretty good research, so it should be very interesting. Our format is our speaker gets an hour to speak, and then we have, we need to get that music turned off. And somebody, yeah, okay. Our speaker gets an hour to speak, and then we have question and answers, and then we have, you get a chance to come up here to the podium and for 5 minutes give your take on things. So tonight, our speaker is Jian Li, who, you're native Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, were you born in China? Mm-hmm. Okay, so she's an expert on China. Okay.
Well, that doesn't qualify.
But anyway, so she's going to speak to us tonight. But before we do that, I'm just going to go through some of the talks we're going to have between now and next month. Next week, we're going to have Jim Gatewood talk about Warren Diamond, the Dallas Godfather. And Jim's a pretty good storyteller, so that should be very interesting to listen to. You learn all kinds of things about Dallas history and all kinds of shady things that happen in this town. I imagine they're still happening, but whatever. And then November 9th, Ann Drum and Joan Ridley. And Ann Drum is the wife of David Drum, who is a member on the Dallas Philosophers Forum Board, in case you want to know that. I don't know. And they'll be speaking on money in politics and gerrymandering, about essential democracy reforms. And I think that's all the talks that we have planned at this time. So tonight we have Jian Li, who's going to, did I do your name right? Okay, good. And she's going to talk about China, friend or foe. And I'm sure we're going to learn some interesting things about China. We'll pass out a handout later when she's ready for it. Just let's give a warm welcome to Jian Li.
Well, I'm happy to be back. This is not an easy topic, right? I've prepared a long time, and I thought this is an important topic, but not an easy topic. So as you know, the topic is if China is a friend or foe. In fact, this is modeled on a talk I heard from Intelligence Squared debate. How many of you have heard Intelligence Squared debate? It's from Britain. And a very, usually they have like scholars, sometimes high-level government officials, to be on Intelligence Squared, and they had a very good debate. And usually the format of debate is they have 3 panelists, and 3 panelists representing 3 different views. And they do a survey in the beginning of the talk, and then do a survey at the end of the talk, and see if they have swayed some opinions, audience. So I want to try this format, and let's do the survey, even though our audience is small, but it's fun. So, there are 3 choices. If China is a friend, a foe, or not sure. It's an open question. Okay, so let's vote. China is a friend. Raise your hand.
I think, I don't know.
Okay, two. Okay, China is a foe. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Undecided. Undecided. 1, 2.
That's the safe one.
Okay. Undecided. Okay, so after the talk, we'll do a survey again and see if you have changed your views. So this is, like, I got this idea from the Intelligence Squared, and it's kind of interesting. I will divide my talk into 3 parts. The first part is to present some numbers, some statistics, comparing United States and China, and the data is from the CIA World Fact Book. It's as much we can trust as possible online. And I'm going to have Ken to distribute some handouts. This is the first part, so to establish a baseline of our comparison and understanding. And the second part is to introduce 3 views of China being a friend or foe, or it's still open question. In the beginning, I was thinking about presenting 3 views by myself. And then I found out it's really daunting. It's too difficult for me to present 3 views. So I decided I transcribed the Intelligence Squared from the 3 speakers, their opening statement. So I'm going to read their opening statements. They are like Harvard-educated professors, prime ministers. They are like high-level people, more knowledgeable than me. So I thought instead of giving my views, I'm just going to present their views. But I'm going to make comment. I do some fact-checking and make comment on their views. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about 2 movies I watched recently that are kind of relevant to this topic. One movie is called The Farewell. The other movie is called The American Factory. Anyone watched any of these 2 movies? Which one you watched?
The Farewell.
The Farewell. So I'm going to introduce those 2 movies and let you know like why I choose 2 movies, and you probably can watch these movies on your own. So these are the 3 parts that I'm going to present. First, I'm going to give you some general numbers and statistics. As I've mentioned, so Ken, you can could you distribute this? Okay. So establish a baseline of understanding China, and what's a better way of understanding baseline is to give you objective facts. And although some statistics may be a little bit like questionable, but mostly it's accurate. And it is from CIA World Book. So the first category, there are 3 major categories I decided to put on this table. One is demographics, land and people and demographics. Second is economic, the GDP, aggregated and PPP. And then the third part is kind of related to government and history a little bit. I don't have time like to go into details. Like just for these 2 pages tables, I can talk for 2 hours, but I probably just do 10 or 15 minutes. So let's look at this table. The first 3 Well, the first two, I'm not going to talk about religion. It's kind of interesting thing for you to look at it, because if I talk about religion, it's a whole different topic. It's just something interesting to be out. But the most important thing, the first two columns, is the land and the population. So in terms of the land, China and the US are comparable, right? Actually, the United States is a little bit larger than China, but very similar enough. But the other part of this land is the arable land. The arable land is a land you can cultivate. So the United States has more land that's fertile, 16.8 versus China 11.3. And then the population, and now there's a big difference, right? So the US is little over 300 million, and China is 1.4 billion, almost 4 times larger. So that has a lot of implications. And urbanization, of course, United States has a higher level of urban population, but China is catching up very fast, 82.5% versus 60.3%. I'm going to skip religion because it's really a different topic. It's kind of interesting here, unless like there's one thing about religion that's kind of relevant, but I really don't have time to talk about today. If you want to ask questions, I guess every question is fair game. So in terms of religion, there's one point that's interesting is the Muslim population. Do you know China has a larger Muslim population than in the United States? Okay, look at the numbers, okay? So I thought this is kind of interesting. So United States, 0.9% population Muslim, whereas China, 1.8. Okay, almost half, more doubles that Muslim population. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. But really, like, I don't have time to talk about religion. It's a different topic. So the second category is the GDP. And GDP has different ways of measuring GDP. So here I highlight 3 aspects of GDP. One, the purchasing power parity is a more like a realistic way of comparing to different countries. So this GDP PPP is the purchasing power parity. And if you look at the aggregate data, China's GDP now from so here we have 3 years, 2015, 16, 17, but it was from 2014 that China's GDP aggregate level is higher than the United States, has been higher than the United States. But if you look at the per capita, China is much lower than the United States, right? The second level, the per capita PPP is on a purchasing power parity basis divided by population. So if you remember the population, China almost 4 times more than the United States. So it divided by 4 or 3.5, that Chinese by per capita is still kind of low at between developing and developed nations. And the next page, GDP real growth rate. So the growth rate of China has been very remarkable for the last 30 years, about 7%. Okay, so 6.9, 6.7, 6.7. So for the last 30 years, it started very low. But when I was like collecting data from CIA World Book, they usually put last 3 years, and I just copied last 3 years. And the US GDP growth is about 2%, more or less, and China is about 6 to 7%. And that's why the rising of the economic development and power has been really fast in the last 30 years. And the next column is the household consumption, how the money is used in these two countries in two big categories. I kind of like had inklings of this category, but one thing really caught me by surprise looking at this table. The thing that caught me by surprise is the government consumption. The US government consumption is 17.3%, whereas China is 14.5%. So my intuition before I was collecting this data, I thought China's government, being a socialist, China's not really a communist country, socialist country, you would expect that government spends more money, right? But this number shows otherwise. I'm just throwing this data and I told you where the data come from. That threw me by surprise. And the other part of the information here kind of caught me in surprise. I don't know about you. Is the last one, imports of goods and services. So both China and the US exports more goods than imports. Of course, China exports a lot more, but the surplus, nevertheless, both. And imports, nevertheless, both are actually in negative terms. In the US, imports of goods and services is -15, China is -18. I mean, there is a difference, but not that much. So that's kind of interesting. And then the labor force. The labor force is really a big difference, and more than 4 times. Is it more than 4 times? Yeah. So, and that's why you see like so many things are made in China, partly because China has a large labor force and they work really hard to make things, right? So the US is only 160 million, where China is 805.06. Okay, so that's a big labor force. I don't know why, like I just copied from this CIA World book, but whatever they did, I copied here. But they included, in the US, they included unemployed. In China, they included this age from 15 to 60, but not directly like same categories, but that's what I got, okay? And the next interesting data is about military expenditure and health expenditure, and that's where the government spends our money, right? So the military in the US, the GDP percentage, you see there's US 3.16, it has been always like 3 point something. And China 1.87, 1.9, so about 2% of GDP. And of course, with the rising of the aggregate GDP, the spending increases, but in terms of percentage, that's what the numbers show. And the health expenditure too, it's kind of surprising that the US government spends a lot more money than the Chinese government. You would think capitalist country, socialist country, China should have spent more money in health, but it doesn't, right? The number says. So that's kind of interesting. And then there's overall government spending that, well, not the military, health, education, and some other things. So there's an overall spending. And it's also surprising, I've already mentioned, so overall spending, government spending, the US government actually spends more than the Chinese government. Okay, that's those numbers say. Government types. One is constitutional federal republic, another is Communist Party-led state. And then there's an interesting history. Of course, history, if we want to learn history, it takes like a whole year to learn history. Now, and just the numbers, American independence is over 200 years ago. Chinese, there's 3 numbers. One number is 1949, when People's Republic of China established, when the National People's Party headed by Chiang Kai-shek went to Taiwan. That's one big history. And the next big history is when it should be the last one here, Qing Dynasty Emperor dynasty ended in 1912 when Sun Yat-sen started the Republic of China. And then the Chinese civilization dates back, usually we date back to 221 BC. That's more than 2,000 years of history. So these are the 3 big histories that kind of highlight the Chinese as a civilization, as a republic, and as a People's Republic of China. So this kind of like give you a baseline of the 2 countries. This can be a whole semester, but 15 minutes. And I think it's interesting, and you can reflect and ask questions later on. So this is my first part. And my second part, as I said, instead of presenting 3 views by myself, I decided to just read the 3 views from 3 scholars and 1 politician. So this is to avoid of running the risk of being biased in presenting my view. I'm presenting someone else's view, and I tell you that someone else's view. So the first view in that Intelligence Squared debate was Dr. Ke Yu-jing, and she is a PhD in economics from Harvard University. She was born in Beijing, and she now is a professor of economics at the London School of Economics, where her research focuses on globalization, international trade, microeconomics, and the Chinese economy. And this is her opening statement. She said, "I think the world needs more friends than foes these days. It's important to cast China in this light. On the one hand, the West tells China, you are a big country, it's time to take up great responsibilities. And on the other hand, it chastises China for too much engagement. China now has become the largest financial supporter to international organizations. For example, UN peacekeeping. It is funding $300 billion of infrastructure deficit in the world and offering $60 billion financial assistance to Africa. For every $1 the United States spends on clean energy investment, China spends 3, taking up about half of the global investment now on renewable energy. More importantly, China is deeply enmeshed in global system. It does well where other countries do well. And that's the single most compelling reason for why China is supporting the globalization and upholding the multilateralism. The most important thing is how do we align the interest of China with the interest of the rest of the world. And demonizing China is not going to solve some of the deeper intractable issues in a Western liberal democracy. But demonizing it could potentially lead to self-fulfilling prophecies. The second point perspective was offered by Sir Malcolm Rifkind. He is a politician and a former cabinet minister He is a British politician who held several cabinet roles under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and John Major. As Foreign Secretary between 1995 to 1997, he handled the final negotiations with China over the transfer of Hong Kong. And this is what he said. He says, "We hope China will be a friend, but it looks like it may end up as a foe. But I think as we speak, the jury is still out. What is clear is that the single most important political development of the century will be the emergence of China as the other superpower. United States and Soviet Union has had it all to itself." I would like to make a couple of points, the limits of what China has achieved. Obviously, the dramatic transformation of China today, but you know what China is doing now is where China ought to have 50 years ago. If it were not for the lunacy of Mao's Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, we've always known that's where China would end up, where they are now. We know that because other Chinese societies, whether it's Taiwan or Hong Kong or Singapore, are essentially Chinese. So it has shown that they are exceptional capitalists. So China now has caught up with them, but it has not overtaken them. Second point is that China would have the world believe that they represent the alternative model to the West because of their remarkable economic achievements. And you don't want to have that kind of democratic societies that we aspire to and actually enjoy. But that's a false argument, because when you think about it, the other Asian countries of comparable economic success to China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, are effectively Chinese. Well, they may not say that. Not only have a comparable economic success, but also combined with the rule of law, with democratic societies to their citizens. So the final point I make is that we are not talking about a choice between Western values and the Chinese characteristics. What we are talking about is whether China will eventually realize that its own people are entitled to same liberties, not just as Western countries, but as the Asian neighbors in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. And then the question of friend or foe will become much easier to address and resolve. Now, the third view is presented by Martin Wolf. Martin Wolf is an associate editor and chief economics commentator at the Financial Times. And Martin Wolf says, well, I'm very much with the third group who refuse to choose between friend or foe. I think that's the right position to take. I don't think it's a very helpful category in thinking about our relationship with this country. And the second reason, which I think is very, very important, is whether China turns out to be a friend or foe depends only to a modest degree on objective circumstances, but I think to a very considerable degree on how we treat it. So we are working hard, particularly the United States is working very hard to make it a foe. He is a British. Not because of the intrinsic nature of the relationship, because of how we behave. We are important actors. The key point to understand China is that it is an enormously important reality, a huge power. A huge country, non-Western, is a very different system from ours. And what we are going to have to do, I hope, is a productive competition and a cooperation. And managing that balance is where our future in the world depends on. So these are the three perspectives in that intelligence debate is the opening state. And if you want to listen to the whole thing, you can Google Intelligence Squared, is China a friend or foe? It lasts for more than an hour. So now my comment, I did some fact checking. The opening state by Ke Yujing is based on the assumption that it will be better to make friends than foes. Secondly, she chose some favorable facts to present China as a responsible emerging power that plays a positive role in the world affairs, such as helping UN peacekeeping, huge investment in the world infrastructure and clean energy. On the other hand, the opening statement Malcolm made is based on the assumption that the dramatic transformation of China is really not a big deal, since other societies with dominant Chinese populations, such as Taiwan, Singapore, they all have achieved tremendous economic development. Malcolm further believes that China will be most likely to be a foe to the West if China insists on developing its economy with the Chinese economic characteristics and does not move into being democratic like the West. Taking a middle ground, Martin maintains that the outcome of China being a friend or foe is dynamic. It's not totally determined by what the Chinese government does, but by how we, the West, especially the US, shapes the outcome. Therefore, the best solution is not head-on confrontation, but productive competition and cooperation. At the face value, the three perspectives all make sense. The first two views seem to be based on facts, while the third view is based on logic and a personal conviction. Although facts are important, but the way the facts are selected and presented and interpreted can sometimes be misleading. So I did some fact checking of what Ke Yu and Malcolm presented. Ke Yu said China now has become the largest financial supporter to international organizations, for example, UN peacekeeping. So the numbers from the United Nations show there are two ways of supporting the peacekeeping. One is the personnel, the peacekeepers. Another is how much money to UN for this particular purposes. So in terms of numbers of the peacekeepers that China contributed, was ranked number 9, or sometimes number 9 or number 11, about 2,500 UN peacekeepers from China, compared with United States, it's ranked number 85 with only 34 peacekeepers. The largest peacekeepers contribution as far as the personnel is concerned is like Ethiopia, India, Bangladesh, Rwanda, Pakistan, Nepal, Indonesia, and Egypt. And later I found out, I got inkling of why these countries contribute more is because actually United Nations pays a stipend to the peacekeepers. So the countries where their governments probably pay less to their soldiers, they are more likely to contribute more to the UN as far as peacekeepers are concerned. And then the second number is the money. How much money China and the US has contributed. So I did some research and found China is the second largest financial contributor for peacekeeping projects next to the United States. So actually United States contributes more money, but far fewer personnel. China can be regarded as the most significant player in the UN peacekeeping effort when the two numbers add up, the peacekeeper personnel and the peacekeeping budget. China peacekeepers and contributes significantly to the funds and the personnels. The second point Ke Yu made about funding $300 billion of infrastructure deficit in the world and offering $60 billion financial assistance to Africa. So this point was also challenged, and I did some research. The funding to infrastructure deficit in the world and to Africa, China did put up a lot of money, but the money put out was not a gift. Rather, it's a business transaction that would benefit both China and Africa, but probably benefit China more in the long term. Now some fact-checking about Malcolm Rifkin's statements. His first point is that the rise of China today is not a big deal or unexpected when he compared China's achievement with the achievement status of, let's say, Taiwan and Singapore. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, all effectively Chinese in his words. His second point is China would have the world believe that they represent an alternative model to the West because of the remarkable economic achievements. And he believes China is more likely to be a foe if it exists on its own economic and political development model without changing its system, political system. His argument is that Taiwan, Japan, Singapore can be economically successful and become democratic. Why can't PRC be like that? If we look at the geography and the population, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore are much smaller than China. In fact, they are so small, they are all can be considered as city-states or islands, one way or another. Secondly, Taiwan's rise in economy is not a result of adopting democratic political system. In fact, it is largely the result of American investment in Taiwan to counter the rise of the communism in the 1950s and early 60s. Between 1949 to 1965, Taiwan received a total of $1.5 billion in economic aid and $2.4 billion in military aid from the United States, while Taiwan was under the one-party rule, the Nationalist Party, and it was under the martial law. In fact, Taiwan's economic miracle started to take off during the 38-year-long consecutive martial law and a one-party system. It was not until 1992 the first democratic election in Taiwan started. In fact, also Taiwan didn't start until 1996 when Taiwan has already achieved a high level of economic development. So 1996 was the first year when Taiwan had a democratic election for the president. It was during the 3 decades in which, so now the same is true of Singapore. Singapore achieved its high level of economic development under one party, under one strong prime minister, one party, under Lee Kuan Yew from 1959 to 1990. It was during the 3 decades in which Lee held office. Singapore grew from being a developing country to one of the most developed nations in Asia. The economic development experience from Taiwan and Singapore show there are different ways of economic development. And a Western democracy is not a precondition for the economic development of non-Western countries. The second point that Malcolm makes is that China would have the world believe that they represent an alternative model to the West. because of the remarkable economic achievement, is also not accurate. China never asserts that its model of economic development is the alternative to the Western model, and has never tried to export its current model to other countries. It has insisted that each country should find a development model that suits its own history and culture. This belief is best illustrated by the famous saying by Deng Xiaoping. He said, "It doesn't matter if it's a black cat or a white cat. It is a good cat as long as it catches mouse or mice." So it doesn't matter if it's socialism or communism or capitalism, as long as if you find a way to develop its economy, it's a good system. So don't hang up on the labeling of any systems. Instead of presenting facts and making personal judgments about China being a friend or foe, Martin Wolf simply refuses to choose the sides. I don't think it's a very helpful category in thinking about our relationship with this country. By refusing to choose China being a friend or foe, he recognizes China being a huge country, non-Western, with a very different system from us. And he cautions us that whether China turns out to be a friend or foe depends only to the modest degree on objective circumstances, but a very considerable degree on how we treat it. So I find his argument very reasonable and hard to argue against, since he also didn't pick and choose facts. So that's, I can't find things to counter his argument. So this is my second part. I presented 3 views and made my comments on the 3 views. The last part of my talk is to bring the theories down to a more human level by talking about 2 movies I watched recently. The first movie is, the title is called The Farewell, and the second movie is The American Factory. Since many of you haven't seen those 2 movies, I'll give you an introduction of the movie. Both movies have very new, produced this year. The Farewell, and both movies are very highly rated. In fact, The Farewell holds an approval rating of 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. Do you read Rotten Tomatoes movie review? Okay, so it's kind of like one of the top reviews people go to. And then to get a 99% is a big deal, right? Okay, so both audience and the critics like that movie. The site's critics' consensus about that movie is The Farewell deftly captures complicated family dynamics with a poignant, well-acted drama that marries cultural specificity with universally relatable themes. It won the Audience Award at the 2019 Sundance London Film Festival. The second movie, The American Factory, received a 97 approval rate on Rotten Tomatoes. It is distributed by Netflix, and that's the only place you can watch. And it's also the first film distributed by former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama's production company, Higher Ground Productions. Do you know they have a movie production company? I didn't know, but now I know. They have a movie company called Higher Ground Productions, and they like the movie so much, and they talk to the producers and Netflix, kind of helping to promote, so it becomes their movie too. The site's consensus reads, American Factory takes a thoughtful and a troubling look at the dynamic between workers and employers in the 21st century globalized economy. David Edelstein of New York Magazine wrote, "It is a great, expensive, deeply humanistic work. Angry but empathetic to its core, it gestures towards the end of the working world as we know it, and to the rise of the machines." This movie won the Best Documentary Feature Award in the River Run International Film Festival. A brief introduction of the movie, The Farewell. The writer-director of the movie is Lulu Wang. She is a Chinese American. It is based in part on her own life experiences, where she first publicly discussed as a part of the episode of The American Life on NPR. It tells the story of how a Chinese American family deals with saying goodbye, farewell, to Nai Nai, and Nai Nai is a Chinese term for paternal grandma in Mandarin, who lives in China and has been diagnosed of having cancer. She was expected to only have a few weeks to live. The granddaughter, Billy, was by Aquafina. Do you know Aquafina? She's kind of well known by young people now. Billy, the granddaughter, was born in China and moved to the United States with her family when she was 5 years old. She has a great relationship with Nai Nai, her grandmother, but she was asked by her parents not to join them for the family reunion in China when her parents and all her relatives are going to see Nai Nai for the last time. The reason for their parents not wanting Billy to go visit Nai Nai was afraid that Billy couldn't keep the secret and might blur out the truth that why they were there. Because Nai Nai didn't know she had cancer, and they didn't want her to know she had cancer. And Billy, they were afraid she would just blur out her Nai Nai's house. But Billy wanted to see Nai Nai for the last time, so she flew to China, and she was struggling all the time why they didn't tell Nai Nai the truth. Brought up in the United States, Billy's first instinct was that Nai Nai had the right to know that she had cancer, and they should not hide the truth from her. Her uncle explained to her that Nai Nai is part of the big family, and it's the family's responsibility to make her happy and well until the last days of her life. If Nai Nai was told about her cancer, she might die much sooner than otherwise. He further explained the difference between Chinese and American cultures. American culture values individualism, believing individuals have the right to know the truth and the freedom to decide what's best for them. On the other hand, the Chinese culture values collectivism. They think individual lives are part of the whole, so the family makes the best decision for the individual. Therefore, the family has decided that it's their responsibility to make Nai Nai happy and healthy as much as they can by not telling Nai Nai the cancer diagnosis. While the film is obviously personal and culturally specific, in fact, 70% of the narration is in Mandarin Chinese with English subtitle. It touches the audience deeply by its candid and vivid depiction of a family in the middle of the crisis and how they transform the crisis into something joyful and hopeful. This movie is able to touch the audience deeply, whether Chinese or American, because it delves into the shared universal human emotions of sadness, frustration, and love, despite the cultural differences. The second movie, The American Factory. The American Factory is a very different film from The Farewell. It is an informative documentary of the impact of globalization on American workers by two well-known documentary movie directors, Stephen Faulkner and Julia Rainchard, who made highly acclaimed documentary including The Last Truck, Closing of the GM Plant, 2009. It documented the closing of the GM plant in Dayton, Ohio in around 2008 and 2009. When the factory was closed in Dayton, Ohio, 5,000 workers lost their jobs overnight and caused economic hardships of many residents there. 5 years later, in 2014, this GM plant in Ohio was purchased by Chao De-Wang, a Chinese billionaire who chose to invest in the plant as a U.S. outlet of Fuyao, that's the name of his company, its automobile glass-making company headquartered in Fujian, China. There are many important moments in this documentary: cultural clashes, the pursuit of profit by the new Chinese management at the expense of workers, desire of forming union, and ultimately by using robots to reduce the cost and making the factory profitable. Despite the conflicts and the frustrations, there are also heartwarming scenes of friendship between the Chinese workers and American workers. I chose 5 scenes from the movie to kind of give you a taste of the movie. The first scene, a flashback of GM closing in 2008, when thousands of jobs lost overnight. The town, Dayton, Ohio, was devastated. 6 years later, 2004, the factory was reopened by this Chinese billionaire. He invested $500 million and brought back 2,000 jobs. He brought 200 workers from China to train American workers, and he first hired 1,000 and later 2,000 and later cut some because of the robots. It was welcomed by the city government and the residents alike in the beginning, since it brought jobs back to the city. In the words of an American manager, the reopening of the factory gives us a new future, and the future is bright. And his words. Scene 2. On Thanksgiving Day, an American worker invited some Chinese co-workers to his home for a Thanksgiving dinner. They shared a meal, they went fishing together, and an American co-worker even showed the Chinese counterparts how to shoot, how to use guns. They laughed and had a good time together. The Chinese workers were especially grateful for the invitation and the fun experience. Scene number 3. When some American workers were invited to spend a week in China during the Chinese New Year celebration, one American worker was moved to tears when he saw young couples were getting married on a stage at Fuyao's New Year celebration, and said, "We are one, we are one, we are one human family," which was echoed by the Chinese co-workers. Yes, we are one. We are one family. Scene number 4. When some American workers wanted to form a workers' union to protect their rights, the new boss, Chairman Chow, said flatly, "We will leave if there was a union." The company hired a union buster firm to win the anti-unionization vote, and there's quite a drama over this. Union and anti-union. Scene 5. The last scene saw the use of robotics to replace workers. And the factory finally made a profit after its initial loss for the first 2 years. The factory has been profitable from year 3. Just a side note, that reminded me of Andrew Young's message, the rise of information technology, robotics, and the effect on American workers, as presenter presented a few weeks ago here. What is remarkable about this documentary is that the directors have never imposed their views on what is happening around them. They let the workers and the management speak for themselves. Their joys and sorrows, hopes and frustrations, cultural clashes, cultural differences and commonalities. However, there's never been a simple labeling and finger pointing for all kinds of challenges facing the management and the workers. You can learn a lot from this movie if you are willing to be open-minded and suspend judgments. So that's my last part. So I have a short conclusion. After weighing pros and cons, now I'd like to make my position clear. I agree with Martin Wolf, Chief Economic Commentator at the Financial Times, that it is wise not to choose between either friend or foe for both political and economic reasons. The global politics is always evolving. We need China to cooperate in many global issues: environment, climate change, potential nuclear war, and dealing with the impact of information technology. If we make China as a potential enemy, we put China to form a close alliance with Russia. As Martin Wolf said eloquently, a productive competition and cooperation is going to be more beneficial than believing China being either a friend or a foe. We are co-creators of what our world will turn out to be, and I invite you to choose hope rather than fear. That's it. Now let's do a post survey. See if there's any changes of if China is a friend, a foe, or it's open, not sure, open-ended. So, as a friend, anyone? 1, 2, 3. As a foe? 1, 2, 3, 4. Undecided, it's open. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess I expanded a little bit of undecided. And I can tell you the result of Intelligence Squared debate. So they did a first survey. It was about third. And by the end, they did a survey again. The third group, undecided, became larger than either friend or foe. And so that's the result. And that's actually what I want to see, in the sense that in a complicated world, there's a lot of things that's unfolding, and it's better to suspend judgment, to keep your mind open, than to make a judgment that might push the result into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay. So now I'm ready to take questions.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah. Excuse me, I'm a little congested. I voted both ways both times, and then vote, because knowing you the little I do, and other Chinese people I've known through the years, I think your culture is so broad and magnificent and historical that you have a tremendous amount to offer the world. And by and large, I see most Chinese people I've ever met as being extremely friendly and kind people, not aggressive at all. When it comes to the government, I think it is the one that you have in China today is one of the most brutal, cruel forms of government on the earth. And that's why I voted both ways. And when we get to comment time, I want to know what you think about that. Distinguishing
okay.
between the people and the
So
government.
what's your question? So tell me, do you want me to answer a question?
Are
or
you
just want to
do you
make-
distinguish between the people and the government?
This is like anywhere, like here, American government and American people. Do you distinguish American people and American government? So when you talk about people, people everywhere are more or less same because we are all human beings. We are all human beings, and that's why I talk about these two movies, is to show like at a human level, we share fundamentally same emotions, we have same aspirations. So it's kind of a given. But the government is more complex, but government and people are very much related. Say, especially like say, it's easier, probably it's easier for you to understand American government and American people than understanding Chinese people and Chinese government because you have more direct experience, right? So just reflect back on American government and American people. And current government is kind of 50% elected, kind of 50 elected by the people. So it's very much related. So if you think like Chinese people as one category and government, it's also very much related. Actually, the approval rate of Chinese government is much higher by the Chinese people than American approval rate of American government. Of course, you keep interpreting different ways. They don't know better, or if you can question the validity of the numbers. But all kinds of surveys, whether done by China or whether done by the West, the approval rate of Chinese government is very high in China. Okay, next.
Jean, couldn't that not be to the fact that, they've had a very developed middle class in the recent last, 2 decades? Would that not be attributable to the preference, the people's, high rating of their government? Would that have a factor?
You
in that?
mean a factor because of the economic
is
benefits?
broaden the middle class
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that is, yeah. So the approval rating, the high approval rating, one of the big reasons is that the benefits people have. 30 years ago, the poverty rate in China was probably like 60 or 70%, and now it's down to less than 5%.
Exactly.
So the Chinese government and the people will say what's most important is food on the table, just like surviving or living in a more comfortable life of democracy. So if you have to choose between these two, most people will choose to have basic living needs met. But if you can have both, why not both, right? So that's, yeah.
Which would be
Both democracy and high level of living
Yeah,
standard.
exactly.
But if you have to choose one, at one stage, people would choose, like people in Ohio, Dayton and Howell, when they lost their jobs, they welcomed the Chinese investment, Chinese bots, because they have wages, they can have their own house instead of they live basement of relatives' house.
and the disapproval of the government here is because our economy and our jobs have gone down. Now, the other question I have for you was, what makes you think that there isn't a fast developing relationship between China and Russia now they have been hooked up in the past, obviously, in the early days of the Chinese, People's Party. But as it relates to even the style of government, dictatorship in the form of a Putin, dictatorship in the form of the Chinese, whatever, and and also the very wealthy seems to have come out of certainly former KGB as well as party members in China, right? Even though the people may be happy at the middle class and below. So what makes you think that they won't even forge, they think the same? So, except in China, the laws are, they don't mess around in enforcing the laws. They may be a little more oblique in Russia about doing it, but they get the job done.
So your question is, why is China not?
Why don't you think that there's not already a strongly formed relationship?
The relationship with Russia, with the United States is always shifting. China and Russia. So every country wanted to maximize its own economic benefits, right? So, well, I think whether Britain or China, for its long term, they really wanted to be alliance with as many countries as possible and not to choose sides if they could. But if they were pushed into a corner, then they would choose a country that would benefit them, at least for the next few years. So China and the United States have more trades between them, and there are also goodwills between them. So I think in a way that they make decisions based on which way will maximize their short-term and long-term benefit. If their relationship with the United States deteriorates, they will naturally form a closer alliance with Russia. If their relationship with the United States is closer, more beneficial, then they will loosen the tie with Russia. So that's why I like Martin Wolf's comment that it's not exactly what China does, but also what we do to affect the outcome of China. If here we always say America first and the unilateral decisions, that would push China and some other countries more away to be more nationalistic. But if we want to be cooperative, then it's less likely they will be driven to Russia.
Well, I was not in on these international discussions, but it is told to me that there were agreements that the U.S. would allow its manufacturing to go to other countries, but China's part of the agreement was they were not supposed to militarize. And in fact, China has put a lot of resources, it doesn't show in the statistics you have there, but they have militarized. And I would put it to you that, in fact, China didn't honor their part of the bargain. And so we have a situation where you have competing ideologies. And I think to put it in the best perspective, there is a saying we have, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. I would put it to you that in fact the dissatisfaction that we have with our government is because we can. What is your comment on that?
So you made many comments. What's your question? So give me one or two questions for me to answer. If it's your comment, I'm not going to comment on your comment. Everyone is entitled to his comment. So if you have a question, tell me what's your question. I will try to answer your question.
I'll let him go ahead.
Actually, I'm a bit surprised that you say that the people are contented with the government. Because actually, is it not true that there is a great strain in Chinese society because many peasant people have to leave and come to the cities and then send money back to keep their families going. And so, that's one strain. The other strain, of course, is the problem of Hong Kong with this upsurgence of democratic feeling, which will obviously tend to spill over. And so these two factors, I think, put a strain on actually the family life and the sort of cultural view of Chinese people. So would you comment on that, please?
So what's your question?
Well, the question is there not a stress, though, in Chinese society, which almost becomes, unacceptable because of those. One is the deficit in democracy, and also the deficit of this tearing families apart, because so many people have gone to the cities, leaving behind their relatives in the countryside.
Okay. Yeah. So the stress in the Chinese society, what are the major stresses and how does the government or people respond to the stresses, right? There are many stresses, conflicts, and the one that you highlighted and the one that the Chinese people voiced, somewhat similar, somewhat different. The Chinese people, the conflict is more over corruption, and some party members have higher level, like they have more money and more power by shady means. And there are also people who at the bottom. But the thing is, the people at the bottom, the numbers of people at the bottom of the economic ladder is shrinking. But the gap between the extremely wealthy and the poor is also widening. Now China is number 2, I think, in the world, has like more billionaires. The United States is the most billionaire, and China is second. So when you have billionaires and have people who live in relative poverty, that's a large stress. And cracking down the corruption is a very important task. But whereas the people in the rural come to the city to look for jobs, these are not like tearing apart families because the government is, because the people want to make money. It's voluntary. It's like Mexicans come here to make money, and we send money back home. Even we don't want them, don't welcome them, they still come. It's not because the Mexican government made them come, it's they want to come. So in China, it's those farmers, families, they want to go to city and to make money. So it's more of the relative poverty in a rural area that make things happen. So if the living standard in the rural area improves, there will be fewer migrants want to go to the city. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is, and also the second debater here talk about, is the system, the democracy system versus Chinese system. That's really a big topic. Whatever the system it is, usually it has a deeper cultural roots. If you look at Chinese history for the last over 2,000 years, there has never been a so-called democratic system. There was emperor, and then Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek and Mao. It has always been autocratic. It doesn't mean like being autocratic is good or it will forever be there. It could change, but it takes time. It is what it is because of the history and culture. And during the Cold War, Russia, Soviet Union, wanted to expand its power over, and there was the communist bloc versus Western bloc. But China now is not exporting its system. It doesn't have a system. It doesn't. Some people say China is more capitalistic than American system. Okay, it's just led by Communist Party, but in many ways it's very capitalistic. Okay, so and China doesn't say like you all need to be like China. It never said that. Not like Russia used to say export communism, but that works well for China. But so some other third world countries, they wanted to learn something from Chinese experience, but that's their choice to learn. It's not that China forces. No one should force anyone to adopt your way of life, whether personal or country level, right? People have to make a decision of what they want to do. Is there one best model that fits everyone in the world?
Yeah, actually, what you've just said is, do you not agree actually that what we see is what George Orwell said in his Animal Farm book, was that really fascism is the same as communism. I mean, it's a totalitarian system, and you see that playing out in China. You see a very, like, this, in fact, I did see the factory actually on Netflix. And so yes, it's very autocratic. It's like the boss saying, well, we're the boss, there'll be no unions, the people don't have a vote, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's basically...
But they hired an American firm to bust the unions, right?
Well,
so
because that's the American system too.
Right.
Union busting is well known. So
right.
basically, that's... Anyway.
What is your opinion on Hong Kong? It's very multicultural, and how is that going to fit into the Chinese system?
Yeah. So this is a very complex question. In fact, I try to understand. I try to read from different sources. And last week, I met someone from Hong Kong, and I said, "Oh, I'm giving this talk, and can you tell me, like in 5 minutes, that I will be able to answer these questions?" He says, "No, wait, no, 5 minutes." So we talked like for 2 hours, and like we still didn't know how to explain. So I don't know if I want to go to there. I can say this, so from different perspectives. There are perspectives from China, there are perspectives from Hong Kong, there are perspectives from Americans. There are so many perspectives. And one of the, I think the key question is their economic, their political, their international influences. And a person I talked to from Hong Kong, and he said, if you look into money, who is funding this protest? So there are two ways of saying it, and how we use our language shapes the way that we see the situation. So there's one way of using the language is to say it's a rioter. The riots.
Yeah.
So they have like destroyed properties and did damage on the street, so it can be rioters. But there's also another way of saying is protesters. Protesters for individual rights. So whether it's a protester or a riot, that's like you can argue both ways. And it has been going on for 5 months, and many of them were wearing black masks, and they had resources that support. So one theory of the resources that support is from Taiwan and from US. So China wants to eventually like reunite with Taiwan.
Yes.
So if Hong Kong can be a peaceful, Hong Kong is already part of China, right? Because 1997, Britain handed over Hong Kong to China, but China had made agreement of, was it 50 years or 60 years that not changing? 50 years of not changing the basic law, basic structure, 50 years of not changing. So if the Hong Kong situation goes well, then the reunification with Taiwan will be more smoothly. If it's not, then Taiwan has more reason to want to be officially independent. So there is one theory that's saying that the Taiwan independent, the forces actually also funds Hong Kong and want Hong Kong to be more chaotic. So that wouldn't like give a good reason for Taiwan and China to be reunited, but rather to push Taiwan to be independent. So it's really complicated. It's not just like what people in Hong Kong want. It's actually under a lot of other influences too.
Well, I'll see if I can form this better into a question. If we were to simplify the Hong Kong debate there, doesn't it have everything to do with a bridge and the recent ruling that basically Hong Kong people could be extradited to China?
That's a misunderstanding. The extradite law is that those like the Chinese corrupted officials who fled to Hong Kong, if they were convicted, they should be sent back to China. Or someone who committed crime, Hong Kongers who committed crime outside of Hong Kong, they could be, but not people in Hong Kong. So the law, the basic law still exists. So if anyone, like a Hong Kong person commit crime, they will be charged in Hong Kong. The amendment is for the loopholes that existing in the basic law that didn't say the Chinese criminals that had committed crimes who fled to Hong Kong and should they be extradited back to China? Or there was a case like a Hong Kong young person killed someone, was it in Taiwan or in another place, in another Asian country, and he couldn't be tried. He killed someone, he couldn't be tried because the law didn't say how this person would commit crime outside of Hong Kong. But the law has nothing to do with Hong Kong people being tried in China. That's a misunderstanding.
Well, why would then Hong Kong people be claiming that this is crossing the line in the sand, that this is a huge issue.
I believe that's also politicized, that actually this amendment of law was actually, after a few months, was like put to rest. And the riots and protests were still going on, so it's more than just because of that law.
My understanding also they want Carrie Lam gone.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But that's too specific. I don't
No,
really
I
want to
understand.
comment on
No,
Hong Kong
no,
because I don't
I
really
see.
know much, and we don't really know much about it.
The questions I have, would you consider taking over some of the islands or shelves or whatever they are and building, landing fields and what have you in the China Seas, a friendly act? Would you consider the imprisonment and re-education of the million Muslims a friendly act? And do you also consider the fact that we have a trading relationship with China, and yet they are responsible for exporting 90% of the fentanyl that comes into this country?
90% of
Fentanyl, illegal. And there's a guy, they know who it is, there's the primary dealer. And so my question is,
it's a drug.
yeah, fentanyl.
Yeah,
Most
so it's a
people-
deadly drug.
It's a deadly drug. Okay, and next to opioids, I guess it would be up there. Well, would it kill you instantly? But I don't know which is greater.
Try to keep it to a
opioids
question.
or fentanyl. But the thing is, the government obviously knows the existence of this person, because the government knows the existence of most people in China. Okay, so here you are having a trading relationship. But you also know that your country, or the citizens therein, are exporting, okay, these drugs in here. And the question would be, do you consider that a friendly act? So 3 questions about friendly acts. Okay.
Okay. First of all, I find the wording of friendly, I consider friendly as very odd. I'm not in a position to say it's friendly or not. Of course it's not. And I'm not a government official. I am a citizen of US. I'm an American citizen, okay? So that's not a best way of framing the question. But I can try to answer your question. So you have 3 parts. The first part is about the islands, right? So in South China Sea, disputed water areas, and there are Philippines and Vietnamese and Japanese and Chinese claim different areas of lands. So I wouldn't use the word friendly. Friendly to whom? Every country is trying to do what is best for them. America is American first. Why China shouldn't say China first? How would American first look like friendly to Britain or to China? It's just not realistic. You are talking about what if the Chinese are making decision, what is best for them. But what is it within the law, within a reason? So it's not meant to be friendly. Are we friendly? Are our policies here friendly to China, friendly to Britain, friendly to Canada? Probably not. What is going on now? Okay, so you have to reframe your question. So why? You could ask, why do they do this? First, we need to understand why they do this. Then you can try to make a judgment. So why do they do this? So the numbers, the statistics I give you, one of the numbers that show you that China is a big country. It has border relations with more than 15 countries. how many border relations does the United States have? 2. Canada and Mexico. And how much threat is Canada and Mexico to the United States? Not much, right? And how much military spending that we have here? Much larger than China. So the border countries that China have, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, I don't know, like 15 countries. And when a country is big and has a lot of conflict, some disputed territories, so think from their perspective. Do they need to have a military to protect their interest? Are they not justified to have some pieces of sea and island to protect? So in the disputed sea area, actually, Vietnam, Japan has claimed a lot of islands. So China actually has left with very little islands or land in that disputed area. So what they could do was just to build from rocks and islands to build up islands and to actually to use as a military base. I wouldn't say it's friendly. Why do they say we do this as a friendly act? They say we do it to defend our interest, just like Americans do to defend our interest and Chinese do to defend their interest. It's pure and simple. Okay, so that's the first point. And the second point, the second question, that was a drug question, and then before the drug question,
And then the Muslim
the Muslim population. So I showed you the numbers. There are actually more Muslims in China than Muslims in the United States. So the kind of news that we see may or may not be factual. I don't know exactly how does the Chinese government maintain the relationship with Muslim population. I don't know, and I also question the kind of information that you read. I can tell you from my first hand. I don't know how to interpret. I can tell you. Before 30 years ago, I've been here longer than I was in China. But when I was in China in the 1970s and the early 1980s, religion was suppressed. So Muslims, Buddhists, Christians were all suppressed. So no one really talk about religion. But the only way that we know who is Muslim is because of the type of meat they eat. They don't eat pork, whereas Chinese people love to eat pork. And in the market, they're more like you can buy pork, but it's very hard to buy beef. So there are special coupons for Muslims to buy beef because they don't eat pork. And that, I don't know now, it's more readily available, but they had privileges actually, but that's not talked about here. And in college, entrance examination, they're very competitive in China. You have to have high grades to go to best universities. Ethnic minorities, which include Hui people, Muslim, they can have lower scores than the majority that's called Han people. Han people is 92%. So it's like affirmative action here. Affirmative action here. So if you're non-Han, you're ethnic minority and a Muslim, just because of religion. Other ethnic minorities are mostly language and culture, but Muslim is religion. But it's considered one of the 55 ethnic minorities. They go to college, compared with other population, they can have lower scores. And when I was visiting a relative 3 years ago, and we passed an area with some ethnic minority, communities, and I think one was Hui, the Muslim community, and my relative told me that the government had to give them more money as an incentive for them to move because they needed to build a road there. Because they didn't want them to make a big fuss. Like, if it's Han people, they push over more easily, but if it's ethnic minority like Hui and Muslim, they are afraid that might cause more issues. So, from what I know, from what I see, I personally, I don't know if they were like millions and millions or hundreds and thousands like were put in prison of this. I don't know. I don't know whether it's true or not. So I can only tell you what I know. And from what I know, they get more privileges by being minority than being a majority. And whether what you said is true or not, I don't know. And as far as the ethanol, the drug is concerned, I know very little. I heard about it, but I know very little about it. I think if it's that a big issue, it should be dealt with government at government and government level. That it's not like individual level, you cannot solve it. You have to put pressure to the government. If this is not dealt with, then certain penalties will be added on. We have big drug issues with Mexico too, and it's very hard to solve. It's just human nature of greed. And I don't know too much about it, but I think it should be dealt with by government at government level.
Would you agree that the announcement of the Chinese century is somewhat equivalent to saying make China great again or make America great again?
Actually, China doesn't claim a Chinese century. It does say like the revival of Chinese civilization, something like make China great again. Just in China, probably like the people and the government uses its 2,000 years or 5,000 years of civilization before, let's say before 1880s. China was #1 in terms of economy in the world for almost 2,000 years, or at least like 1,500 years. So China had, like historically, they had their reason to say we want to make China great again. Like 200 years ago, we used to be great, but we have been going down. Now we want to be great again. They do say that.
How long do you think the Communist Party will last in China? Do you think they'll ever be rid of it?
That's $1 million question. No one knows. If I could give you a definitive answer, I wouldn't be here. I would be paid billions of dollars.
Okay.
You got another question?
Yeah. Do you believe that Mao was the saving grace for the majority of people in China, given their history 50 years prior to him coming? I mean, he was very well educated and didn't have to go do that job, but what do you think about that?
I wouldn't use the word as strong as like either saving grace or devil. These are two extreme words. Like, he is not a saint, he is not a devil, he is not.
I'm not religious, I just wanted to know.
So saving grace, it's a very strong word.
Well, the point is, was Mao right for the
No.
time that Mao
No.
was there and what he did? Do you think that that was to the future benefit of China versus from
Yeah.
whence they came?
Yeah. So, he has done great things, and he has done really bad things in Chinese history. Some people say 70-30%. Some people say actually
Deng Xiaoping, when Deng Xiaoping came back to power, and he wanted to kind of have assessment of Mao, and he made assessment of 70% good, 30% bad. Okay, so that's kind of official line. Now, of course, there are people might say 30% good and 70% bad. Or there are people say 50% good and 50% bad. So there are pluses and minuses. So I would say his plus was he ended the Chinese Civil War, because after the Opium War in 1840, China was in turmoil for 200 years, either invasions from other countries or civil wars. And Mao, 1949, unified China, and the nationalists had to retreat to Taiwan, Republic of China, Taiwan, still today. But he ended the Civil War and made the China unified country. So it's good for Chinese people when you ended the war and started a peaceful economic development. But the Cultural Revolution did a lot of damage to economy, to culture, to politics, to so many things. That's definitely a bad thing for China. And later the Great Leap Forward was really bad for China. But it was during Mao's time, the literacy rate, China's literacy rate increased, the living standard, the life expectancy raised. These are just numbers that shows you. So you can't compare China with Taiwan. You have to compare China with India. If you compare China with Taiwan, Taiwan is small. Taiwan was supported by the United States to counter the communism. So you cannot compare that. You have to compare China with India. India is a democracy. So if you look in a big country with a lot of people, so in terms of economy and people's life, living standard, which one is higher, China or India? And Mao also played a role there. I mean, he also did bad things.
Well, I think it's the only way that he could have done it in circumstances. I think he did a good job. 30%, not so good, but hey, look where it's at now. If Mao hadn't done what he had done, okay? And as long as people are fed and educated, eventually they'll, tap out perhaps down the road, because people's greed kicks in big time, okay?
Any more questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, now it's your turn. So if you have 5 minutes, so come up and have your say.
Thank you for that presentation. I always enjoy your presentations. And I've always been very impressed by you as a person. I would like to have my 5 minutes extended to an hour, please. I think this government in China is one of the most brutal, cruel governments in the history of the earth. I'll tell you exactly why. There was a man who noticed something in China some years back. There were like 400 to 600 organ transplants per year in China until around 2000, and then it went up to over 5,000 a year. And he thought, what the world's going on? So he researched it for some years. When he found the truth, he immigrated to the United States because he knew if he had exposed it there, he'd have been killed like that. You don't speak out against the Chinese government and stay in China today unless you want to be killed. And there's more and more statistics coming out on that. What they had been doing, what he had found, is the Chinese government went out against the Falun Gong religious sect. And they started arresting them and harvesting body parts from them. They sell body parts for like a liver or a kidney up to $100,000 per. These capitalists, if you will, and that's the extreme of capitalism in my opinion, this greed and lust for power, they make a lot of money out of that, and they don't care how much pain is induced to these people because they don't even anesthetize them. They cut those body parts out while they're strapped down and screaming. This is horrible what's going on in China today. I had on the computer that died, and it's on the disk somewhere, a presentation by a military leader to his military group. He was a very high-ranking leader, talking about the eventual invasion of the United States, that they will take down the United States, and it won't be nuclear, and it won't be a big war. It'll be in one fell swoop biologically. And the reason was they need our farmlands to feed all of their people. Like you pointed out, they don't have near the farmlands that we do. Also, Kathleen Keating, who is the daughter of the former governor of Oklahoma, she reported on this, and another person reported on this, and I knew a fellow in Army intelligence who knew about this. For a period of some years, Chinese container ships were sailing into a base in Mexico, up near our border. And that was completely controlled by Chinese. It had barbed wire fence with razor wire around the top. It was guarded by very strong, tough-looking men in civilian clothing, but they had military automatic weapons on their shoulders. And they unloaded these containers off of these ships and moved them into warehouses. They didn't even leave the containers outside of the warehouses. And these ships were escorted across the Pacific Ocean by Chinese military ships. So I think we might know what's been unloaded for a future invasion, potentially. That's my best guess, and I think it's probably good, and it's the best guess of a lot of other people too. I love this idea when you talked about 9/9. What we hold in our consciousness is what we project for our future. There's a lot to that. And when they held that fear of cancer from that lady, it probably helped her live longer. Because, you know, in our Bible it states, "And that which you most greatly fear shall come upon thee." Because if you have read the book or watched the DVD, The Secret, you know that what we hold in our hearts is what we project for our future. And there are many examples in that book. You ought to read that book if you haven't, that show just how that happens. Capitalism, I don't like that word anymore. What we had in this country was free enterprise. And we didn't have the greed that one company wants to take over the whole spectrum of that industry and drive everybody out of business, like Walmart and the thousands of family businesses that went bankrupt because of Walmart. I don't like Walmart at all because of that. China is the worst in the world on pollution. Animal species back up in the hills are dying out because of the air pollution. People all over China in the cities are having to wear air filter masks, and the Chinese government doesn't seem to be doing a lot about that. They also are installing more and more electronic tracking of people, facial recognition of cameras all around the cities where they know everybody and what they're doing and where they are. I will look at those movies. They sounded very interesting. I think the Chinese people have a marvelous potential. I look back at some of the history of, what was it, Admiral, was it Zheng Ho was his name? Brought the first giraffe to China in 1017. He had a fleet of ships and some 28,000 sailors and sailed the world, taking spices and silks as gifts to the people they met. Didn't do any colonization at all, but went as friends. And I think that shows a lot about Chinese culture. Well, I could go on and on, but that covers it. I think the thing that you pointed out about how what we need to do is hold this sense of the unity of all mankind in our consciousness. And when we see an evil in the world, don't accept that, but project man made in the image and likeness of the Creator, which is all good. And see that where we think that we're seeing all these evil things. That's called a form of constant daily prayer. And it is our intentions, our strong ideas with feelings behind them, that project changes into the world. And that's why I think we should dwell on the positive as much as possible, recognize the wrong things, know that they need to be changed, but see the good behind all of humanity and how that is evolving into a better world for us all. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Well, thank you, Jan. I certainly did enjoy it. It's very topical these days. Anyway, my position was you know, I really don't know. I certainly care. But I reflect back on the comment made by Lord Palmerston. He was the Foreign Secretary in England after the Napoleonic Wars, when Britain had the power to decide things. He later became Prime Minister, and what he said, in this world there are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies. You just have to deal with them as time goes on. I think, to quote Charlie Brown, we've seen the enemy and it's us. In dealing with China, there's a huge imbalance as people. And that's really because of American stupidity and American greed combined. It's certainly, if I were Chinese, I'd say, fine, you give us your technology and we'll use it. We'll do as much as possible to build up our own economy, and I don't blame them. And so, of course, the other thing is, Lorraine mentioned fentanyl. Well, what's the problem there? It's just American demand for it. It's like America's demand, their demand for cocaine and heroin. It destroys Central and the north part of South America. Don't go around blaming others for supplying stuff that stupid young people in America stuff up their nose and inject themselves. It's not their fault. They're just supplying and demand. Now, I don't, the way Chinese seem to operate, economically, has some seeds of problems, actually. Because in order to keep, yes, the Communist Party stays in power by improving the living conditions of the Chinese, and they've done that. But they've also pumped up using fiscal methods they've spent a huge amount of money, actually, and that sort of spending at their level is in fact unsustainable. They built cities, as we know, that are not half occupied and so on. So they have an unbalanced system, actually, and also with respect to the rest of the world, this imbalanced trading relationship, and they have been manipulating their currency down so that their goods are cheaper. But of course it was American business that wanted that, actually, because they wanted to buy cheap and sell high in America. Again, that's unsustainable. So this trading relationship was unsustainable really from the word go, but because it suited corporate America and it suited China, they both sides loved it. And in fact, actually, the way the American federal deficit got paid was by selling U.S. federal bonds, actually, to the Chinese and everyone that would buy them. The conflicts come, actually, when things get so imbalanced, actually, that this causes conflict. And so these tensions actually are important. And it's as much social as economic. And I think you do see there is. I think the Hong Kong situation does show the fact that you can't just pay people to riot and they'll go on rioting for weeks and weeks. No, there is a deep-seated desire. Look, we want to govern ourselves. We want to have our own people govern us and so on. And I think that in the end, and the Communist Party know that the only reason they're in power is because they have delivered the goods, they have raised the standard of living, they have increased literacy. But I think it's not done looking at the system by terrible, huge fiscal spending and debt, actually, that again, that's not sustainable. So I think in all these things, there's a balance. There's a sort of an optimum balance to be drawn here, where both parties benefit. And so, so I'm disturbed, and a long time disturbed with the China trade. I think it has damaged the American worker. And look what's happened. That's why Trump was elected, because America was hurt. Ordinary guy was hurt, right across the Rust Belt. And the other thing to say about, I mean, Jaguar Land Rover now is half owned by the Chinese, and they're building Jaguar Land Rovers in China. The only problem is the Chinese are rejecting them because the parts are inferior. Jaguar Land Rover never had a great reputation anyway, you know, for reliability, and certainly putting junk parts in from China is certainly not helping. So, you know, look, and you know, unless so all around there is an imbalance. You know, if you can't, you know, if China's going to do well in the world, it must make better quality goods, really. And the same with America. If it wants to sell, it has to make make stuff that people want. I mean, that's true of any country. And as we see now with Germany, because the world trade is shrinking, Germany is now in a semi-recession. Its manufacturing is shrinking, in fact. But mind you, their cars, you know, if you really look at the stats on BMWs and Mercedes, some of them is pretty bad actually, and it's very expensive to keep going. I mean, a good old Ford that I like to drive is a very good car actually. Anyway, Dan, that was very interesting. You know, I think it points out the world is troubled. I think wherever you look, it's you know, we can see that minorities tend to be victimized wherever they are and whatever they're doing. One hopes that in the end a system of balance in the world in terms of society will prevail, I think. But I think people do want to be free, do want to have a decent life, do want to have the same government, and I think that is important.
Well, I do have great faith and hope in the Chinese people, and the culture has gone on for millenniums. It's a very deep culture. We cannot touch in even many meetings some of the deeper aspects of the Chinese culture and what it brings to the world. My hope would be that this Marxist communism under Mao and after Mao will simply be a small stop in the progress of Chinese culture going forward, and hopefully maybe can go on beyond that. As far as a terminal illness as the perfect situation for a collective approach, especially of a family, in dealing with a situation like that, which does not mean that collective or collectivism is the perfect approach in other situations. I come in defense of rugged individualism and of the idea that in fact the world is a frontier, whether we perceive it as a frontier or not. It's always up to individuals on a frontier. And that's one of the areas where I don't think that collectivist or socialist theories work very well, is in dynamic change situations where you have a lot of challenges. I cannot celebrate Mao. I cannot celebrate Mao's 80 million dead. That got a shrug from Lorraine.
Everything's relative.
Yeah, everything is relative, yes. Well, you know, it's true, we only live for a moment, really. And many of the people on our journey through life, it's those we start with, we don't finish with. It's life itself is a real great challenge. But one of the things about individual liberty and the individual system is it keeps our hands free to deal as best we can and make the world around us in our sphere of opportunity as blessed as can be.
I don't know exactly what the number was, as it was.
80 million is their number.
All over, yeah, over a period of time. But he did save many, many hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, so.
I don't know
I
that.
didn't say that it's a perfect system. I thought it was a system in place at the time, and quite frankly, if it had happened with India back in the day, you know, maybe they would have had a lot under control by now as well, rather than trying to hand out transistor radios for people to have vasectomies, you know, back in the 60s and 70s. In any case, the film The Fall, I think, yeah, and I did see a preview of it, and I did see it, some people interviewed were in the film on PBS. And that's where I get my news from, by the way. PBS every night, and Frontline, and many other
That explains.
organizations and newspapers that, you know, have been around for 60, 50 years, something like that. So in any case, not someone's blog, what I think that the film reflects is the incredible sensitivity and respect that seems to be innate within Asian culture, and very specifically Chinese. And I've known Singapore. I've had a whole slew of Singaporean friends when I lived in London. And it's just part of their nature and character. It's there from birth. It's ingrained in them. So when I speak to what's going on now, as it relates to why I consider China to be more foe than friend, has nothing to do with the population, because their voices are not really heard. They're living, and they're eating, and they're being educated, and so on and so forth. But I do fear for you know, what's going on, not only with the trade situation with this country and all the other countries that China does trade with. And it is totally imbalanced, and they have robbed intellectual property from, I'm sure, more countries than the United States. And the jobs are gone, and we have a major debt, much of which we owe to China, which is kind of ironic given the fact that we gave them the money in the first place that we borrowed.
What's the number one country we owe that to?
Sorry?
What's the number one country we actually owe that to?
Well, I don't know that it would be China. I think
It's not China?
the Saudis, maybe.
It's Japan.
Japan, seriously. I've learned something. Because actually China, but maybe more on steroids, is almost similar to where Japan was in the 70s as far as the trade and what have you, and playing around with their own economies.
The debt versus it's internal, it's national. So it's American people.
Yeah.
So second is Japan, third is China. So there's actually nothing to blame for Japan or China. We have to blame ourselves.
Oh, no, not,
Let's let her, you're gonna get a chance
yeah.
to.
No, I'm not blaming China, and I'm not, your talk was fantastic, okay? I'm just saying, I think that we're going down a path here, and, you know, whether the West deserves what's happening to them at this point, given their stupidity, and it's not only America, it's all the Western countries, okay? I don't think that that's even a point to be argued. We got ourselves here, and we didn't protect our own, okay? Because just a very small slice of this society, you know, the very wealthy, are determining what's going to be best for them, and not for the other people in society. Whereas in China, at least, even though there's a very small sliver that is getting billionaire class and you know, mostly part of the NPC probably, same for Russia, okay? And at least in China, the people are getting fed and have a middle class and what have you. Ours is just, although now the inequality is beginning to show, or the spans between, you know, the very wealthy and middle class and the poor. And that's been going on like this forever here. So as it relates to the fentanyl thing, again, drug dependencies, again, worldwide. It's not just in you know, the states that is the case. But also the irony is that the Brits addicted the Chinese to opium, you know, 100, 150 years ago, and in fact insisted that they trade opium. So, I mean, even when Mao came along, there was a lot of addiction going on there too, and I know that was one of his 5-year leaps at one point. But I don't even know what is the situation, if you could answer in the end, with even addiction. Is there any semblance of it at all in China today? I would think not, but if...
Probably not.
Yeah, okay, so in any case, I just think that we all come full circle. We've been kind of here a little bit with Japan in the past, when it owned a good part of the world economy in the 70s. But the thing with China is the expansion to such a degree that they're getting into really, I mean, they have a 2030 plan on AI and so on and so forth. And yes, America was the most innovative of countries, along with parts of Britain and England, Europe. But we did innovate tremendous things in this country, and we've lost that grasp. And that's through our own stupidity too. So whoever's putting together these contracts should be shot, as far as I'm concerned. But in any case, that's it.
Have a go.
We've still got a lot of them.
In respects, I would like to say I enjoyed your presentation. It really enlightened me a great deal. I used to teach history, and I taught lots of world history, and lots about China and things like that. And I go back to pioneer history, and you know, we hear a great deal about the smartness of Chinese people.
Yep.
But way back, they assumed they were smarter than anyone else. They had more inventions than anyone, and that's when they build a wall. When they build a wall, they kind of isolate themselves from the rest of the world. And one of our commander, Perry, went over with the ship, and that's where they say, let China sleep, because when they awake, the whole world will be sorry. But those are kind of interesting things. I guess being an American myself, sometimes it's hard for me to support, from my heart, a lot of the iteration that goes on by American leaders. Because we try to tell other people what they're supposed to do. We have a constitution that says we're supposed to do it, and we're not doing it. And I have a hard time dealing with that. We have to never forget the impact of culture. And Chinese culture is very, very old. and we're not gonna make little Americans out of them. But their culture has been with them much longer than ours has been with us. And one of the things, the tools the Chinese use in Africa and other places where it's going, it doesn't tell them what to do, but they have a contract, and the Chinese are going to benefit more than they are, but they are helping in infrastructure, particularly in Africa and other nations, but they're going to benefit from that also. They don't try to tell them you got to be, they don't get involved in trying to get them to change their culture. That's a big difference from what we do. We try to make people like us and disregard their culture and history. And it doesn't happen. They do it as long as they feel they have to. So that's the problem. We were saying why it seems that the people of China has a higher ratio of respect for their government than the people in the United States. And that too has to do with culture. Like you indicated, there's never been a democracy in years and years in any way in China. So that's all the people know. And if their lives get better, they're not going to, and it wouldn't be wise for them to rebel anyway, because it would be stopped. They don't play around with things like that. So some is fear and some is just the culture. It's best to be passive, I guess, and they do that some. But there are problems emerging in China. Some of the building the cities and stuff they're building, that's going to create some problems for them. And some of us in Western nations who have so-called representative democracies, if we had 1 billion people, we wouldn't have one either, because that would be too difficult. You can't have that many voices protesting going on like that. And really, if it gets bad, we'll crack down on it too in the United States. So we have to understand the culture. And so I say that, we have President Trump. His base support him, and they really aren't benefiting from anything, but they support him because they like what he said. And so that is maybe some of the same concerns that we have in China. I do think, like I said, we have to, my thing is, if we need to trade with someone, let's trade with them. But on a fair trade, trade is going to be reciprocal. But don't be trying to tell them they can be a democracy and be like we are, because the nation, we deal more with China than we do with India. And India is supposed to be a democracy. So we like dealing with dictators, and because we like doing that. So to me, that's inconsistent with doing it. But if we keep pushing, like President Trump is pushing against China with his tariffs, you will force North Korea, Russia, and China to get together. We don't want that. Because there have been times, if Russia and China had agreed with the Security Council involved in Syria, they would have stopped it some time ago. But they vetoed it when it came to the Security Council. And so we have what we have right now, a situation that's still very unresolved, just like Afghanistan and Iraq. The American people's got to wake up and recognize that we all, majority of us have been, for lack of a way, not treated fairly. When 90% of the people earn less than $100,000 a year, that don't mean we're the richest country in the world. And when we look at the average price of a house in Dallas at $250,000, how many of us can afford it? And I think the business people, multinational corporations, are making the stuff in China and bring back here, selling it maybe a little less than if they were producing it here. If we can't buy that stuff, it's going to hurt them. If we don't have the large and the people buying stuff, is what stimulate our economy. If we can't buy it, then nobody will have a job. So those are the kind of things you got to work with. And the thing about me, and I know I'm going over my time, is that I used to be a kind of a disciple of Greenspan. You know, he managed the interest rate, his inflation, very good. But then when it got down to the crisis in 2007 and 8, he was talking about what China wasn't doing, and we found out we were borrowing a lot of money from China. And if they were doing so bad, how could they buy bonds? That's it, really buy bonds. And that's what he didn't enforce the regulation that he had because he didn't believe it. He was a disciple of Ed Ryan. And so he and the person who was over the Security and Exchange Commission, they didn't believe it. They had the regulations, they probably could have prevented some of that from happening, but they didn't because they believed in regulations. So, reasonable thing that people in America got to wake up and try to elect people who are going to do things for all of us and not just for them. I thank you for reporting because it did shed some light on things that I answered some questions about. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, John, I guess if you come up and make final remarks and rebut anybody's rebuttal or whatever you want to do here.
I just want to make 2 points. Although I care, and I know you care about world affairs, about how we are doing, how China is doing, the effect and so on, but what we can really do actually is not much. What we can do is to reflect and not to be misled by all kinds of news, fake news, to keep an open, non-judgmental mind. If you have an open and unjudgmental mind, you get more information and you are more critical than you think you know for sure. We don't know for sure. We don't know for sure what's going on in our lives, in American cultural politics, how much you really know about what's going on in China. So you have to have a sense of humility. And I constantly remind myself of being so. Another point is, I constantly hear people would say something like, Chinese people, Chinese culture are great, but their government is terrible. And Chinese people and Chinese culture is more superior than many other cultures or peoples. It troubles me. It doesn't make me happy. It troubles me for 2 reasons. One is we don't consider. For one is people everywhere is more or less same. If you say any people as a nation, as a culture is superior, you run risk of being racist. So it doesn't make me happy to hear either say Chinese people are smart, hardworking than anyone else, or American people, because we do run risk of being racist. All people everywhere should be equal. Actually, it's the culture and the politics that makes us different. In that sense, then you have a truly humanistic view about the world and not being biased. And it cannot be the people great and a culture or politics of government terrible. It doesn't make sense. Actually, the government is very important. How is the government formed? Whether it's Chinese government or American government, it is supported by the people, especially in the long run. Now, may not be this year, next year, 2 years, 3 years, but if you say it's 100 years or 1,000 years, actually the government has done something right to gain the support of the people. So you have to be critical of not just saying, oh, people are great, government is terrible. It's not possible, actually. And we support. Even though like, oh, China authoritarian, the government can't do anything. No, it can't. Actually, the government has to be responsive to the demand of the people in different ways. It cannot sustain. No government can sustain without people's support. So, I think this is an important thing that we need to reflect. And the last point is there are many theories and views coming from different sources, and especially nowadays, there are a lot of conspiracy theories coming out from different sources. And conspiracy theories, maybe there are elements of truth, but a lot of conspiracy theories run on the fear instead of hope. So personally, I don't spend my time to listen and to reflect on those theories, especially the theories stoke fear. I think we need hope. I think between fear and hope, I choose hope. Between thinking like positive or negative, they're just like cups half full and half empty. What's the point of looking at a cup half full, half empty, and thinking the end of the world is coming? It's just as possible, like ending or not ending, great or not great. It's all possible. But I just tell you, I choose to be on the side of love and hope, not despair and fear. And any theories that get me into fear is not something that I run into and celebrate.
Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes our program for tonight. You're welcome to stick around. I think the restaurant closes at 10 or 10:30. So if you want to hang around and talk to Jian or talk to anybody else, go right ahead.
Did a good job.